right, yo, everybody. This is the Mind Body Marathon podcast here, and I'm your host, Dr. Leo. And on today's show, we have none other than Aaron Rowe, and we're going to talk today about masters running and some of Aaron's travels, and kind of hash it out a little bit. So Aaron and I go way back. We competed against each other a lot in college. He crushed me every time we raced, and then after college, we competed a lot together, and then became good friends. And he is still at it, right? How old are you? 43?
I am 43 years old.
And then he just won yesterday the Subaru 4-miler in Buffalo, the Masters, and made a little dough on that one. So tell us about that event.
So Subaru, and what I found is that it seems that some of the better races are disappearing.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine was like, "Why did you drive all the way up from Columbus to Buffalo to race?" And well, there's good Masters money, and I know there's going to be good competition.
Yeah.
And there's just not many races left to go to.
I know we were talking the other day. I was talking to the race director of the Johnny Cake Jog.
Oh yeah.
And how that is not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like dudes don't go there and duke it out anymore. Like it's crazy. That used to be, that's actually where I first met you, I think.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, because it was like I remember coming down that home stretch on that terrible stretch. Everybody that's run that race knows there's like a mile and a quarter and you can see the finish line and it's hot because it's in July and it's just terrible. It's the hard, and you almost never seem to break any ground on anybody there. It's like no matter how hard you try, you cannot pull anybody in. So that's what happened with me. I was like watching you run. You had long hair at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I was joking earlier, like sideshow Bob kind of hair. It was like bouncing very, and I was like, it looks like a poodle is on his head. Like, and then I was like, who is that guy? Because I had everybody else accounted for up front, and then there was always the random Africans that were there, and then you, and I'm like, what the heck? So that was my foray into the Aaron Rowe world.
Well, and I remember just seeing your last name, and I think you were wearing the Malone jersey.
Probably.
And so I was like, oh, it was this young up and comer, another guy I got to worry about.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, and that I remember the first year I ran Johnny Cake, that long stretch, it's like 2 miles. And
Yeah.
I'm off the hill, and it was me and Matt Folk. And I was like, oh, this is a great time to take the lead. I'm going to press it and take it.
Yeah.
This is the worst choice ever. Because he came right back on me because I just started looking at him.
Folk is a hard dude to put down.
I'm like, where's the finish line? I'm like, oh, wait, it's way down the road.
One of my favorite Johnny Cake memories was when Cortez raced one year.
I know the story.
And then, there's like there's like 4 or 5 Africans up front sort of leading the charge. And then there was still a big pack at the time. There's probably like another like 4 or 5 guys latched onto them. And then they kept turning around. And then Cortez goes, he's like, we're still here, you a-holes.
Yeah. And he yelled it too. Yeah. That was the year that we ran.
Yeah. That was like perfect because they were just like looking around to see when they're going to start dropping us.
And I think there's some, you don't often get laughter in a pack in a race.
Yeah.
That was one of those rare moments where people were actually laughing.
The timing was just so perfect.
Very Cortez-like. Shout out to Nick.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else you got planned for the summer then? Any other races?
I don't know yet. I think that's the hard part is, number one is I got to recover. And then number 2 is what's the next race? And I haven't quite looked that far ahead, but I figure I'm pretty good shape right now. And I'm excited about that.
So how do you then, just not knowing your schedule and just keeping a foot in the door with racing and stuff like that? Like, how do you stay fit? Kind of one of your master's secrets.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm always constantly running. Like I don't really take a lot of days off. I'll take like maybe a month where I might run very minimal. I might take some days off, but I'll keep training.
Yeah.
But as far as quality sessions, I don't do a ton of those anymore. And I don't find that I have to do as many.
So what would you do in a week? Like an average week when you are doing some quality, what would you do?
You mean now?
Yeah.
I might do 40 to 50 miles a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I feel good, if I have one day where I feel really good, I might run a little bit quicker, lower 6-minute pace, 6:20 pace, just however I feel. And then I might try to get a quality session in once or twice a month. That might be like a tempo run. That might be like a threshold session.
So you're literally just running volume every now and again, just kind of like a haphazard tempo-ish when you're running a little faster,
Yep.
and then just a couple workouts a month.
Yep.
That is amazing. I love hearing that because you have no idea how many masters guys I treat that they consistently are injured and
Mhm.
they feel like they need to train like they're in college still, because we all have that sort of like template of what it was like. And you've strayed really far from that template. That is not at all like your Edinburgh days.
No, definitely not. Well, so you tell me about your master's training.
Well, my master's training was weird. So like I when I opened up the clinic in 12, so I was like, what, how old was I? 30 years old.
Yeah.
I only ran like seriously for another like 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 or 4. And then I just like had this injury and I just stopped running altogether. So I didn't run for like 5 years. So then I became a master's and then that was guys, so I had Mariah,
Mhm.
and then I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna run that much," so I just capped myself at 20. Because I didn't wanna be like I didn't wanna take her away from work and her and, and the family and all that, so I just kinda kept it at 20, and then it became a game of, like, how fast could I run on 20 miles a week, which I in the end isn't very fast.
I don't know. Well, because you were telling me like you'd go and you're running a sub 3 hour marathon,
Yeah,
but you're like, I'm only running like 20 a week,
yeah.
which is crazy to me.
Yeah, so that I mean, the volume side of it was kind of an interesting little puzzle piece there, but if I ran a long run, if I ran 18, then I only ran like 2 miles, like, on Wednesday. And I did that a lot. I did that for 20 marathons. I ran sub 3 on that. But, when I'm back from my Achilles, I'll be able to get back after it, kinda do the same thing. But I can already tell even, like, this year off from marathoning, I can tell, like, I'm different. Like, I'm still not even I go to sprint after Mariah, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a little different again."
Do you find masters running like we ran the USATF 5K
In Atlanta.
championships in Atlanta, had a big hill right before,
Mhm.
3 mile mark. And do you find it to be more painful than when we were younger?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I find actually, the way that I would think of it is, like, I find that my body feels more pain, like my knees and my
Yeah.
ankles and stuff, but I can't push the envelope fast
Mhm.
enough to feel the burning, searing, awful, dipped in acid pain that you get when you can hammer like a
Yeah.
5K. Um, so I would say plus also, like, our window of experience with pain is much more. Like, we're just tougher now, like, as you get older, you just keep getting tougher. You're just always sore, so you kinda just get you hardened to pain. Um, so I would phrase it that way. What would you say to that? How would you answer that question?
I think that's spot on. One of the things that I've noticed is that because I don't do as many quality sessions, if I get into a race and I go out too fast, it's brutally
Yeah,
painful. So I'm very cognizant of I have to stay within myself. The younger runners go out hard, maybe like we used to.
yeah.
And then a lot of them come back, and that's kind of the fun of it. Yes, it is inherently
That's kind of the fun of it.
but the process is inherently more painful because I'm 43. I have X amount of miles on my legs. How many races? Who knows? But the story I love is when we were going to go to the 5K champs before that, I was struggling, right,
Yeah.
physically. And I was just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to go. And you said to me, dude, it's a master's race. Everybody's dealing with something.
It's true.
And I was like, I had there's immediate effect from that. Like you're a
Yeah.
coach or something. I was like, it's time to suck it up, man.
Yeah.
He's
No, it's
right.
true, like, you go to masters races and it's like the amount of sacrifice that takes that individual to get to the line. The juggling of the family, the juggling of work, the dedication of time, the fighting through the discomfort. There's a real respect there, like if you're 25 and you're a pro track runner, it's like you literally like we had, Katie Moon on, she was talking about how like she sits on the couch most of the day. Like her life's pretty boring. And she's like, I just need to chill. And she does to stay at that level of high level pole vaulting. And that's not the life of a master's guy. Like like you're fitting it in somewhere. And that's really honestly the reason why I hung out at 20 miles a week was fitting it in somewhere. It's easy to fit a 3 miler in at lunch.
Well, and I think to your point, when I was in college, maybe there's some athletes or college teammates who ran because simply they had talent, and that's kind of your time, right? When you're a masters runner, I think you truly do love to be out there, and that's the
Yeah.
piece of it for me. People say, "Why are you still competing?" Because here's the thing: like, I'll tell my family I ran a race, nobody cares. My friends, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
Not like when you're in college and everybody used to come and watch me. Now they're just like, "Oh, you ran another race. Great."
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, "Yeah, I love this. I wanna be out there." This is still kind of a big deal, but it's more for the pure enjoyment of it, and
Yeah.
that's what I love about Masters
I know
running.
that's why I always loved the quote, even when I was younger, that from Joe Hill, like, "Do it for the joy of effort." And
Mhm.
it's like, it just brings back the purity of the sport. And there's like a badge of honor too. You finish these races as a master, and it's like everybody's hobbling around, everybody's like looking for the nearest banana and like just trying to like just and then everybody's like there's hugging on each other and just having a great time, and like because there's definitely respect there.
My mantra anymore is I get to be an athlete today when I go to race.
Yeah.
And I love the aspect of I still get to be an athlete. No, it's not at the level that it used to be, but that's not what it's about.
Yeah. Hmm. I know the ritual is what I miss the
Mm.
most. I love the routine of like, the waking up, the jitteriness, the little food that you can eat in the morning, the laying out of the jersey, the getting the shoes ready. And I mean, I think we've had enough pro athletes on here to talk about like their routine, and there's something about that makes it super special. It's like anytime that and I would encourage any of the younger athletes watching this to like develop a routine, develop something that just that your brain knows goes, boom, I'm locking in. And then you kind of go into this another person, like this another realm.
When you took a long period off and you came back to racing, what was that like? Did you fall back into your routine? Was it difficult? Because
Yeah.
that's interesting to me.
What was really funny is I had forgot about a lot of my routine. But then it came back quickly. But what I did was like I opened up my spike bag and I was like, oh, it's somewhere in the attic somewhere. And it's like all up in storage. And I opened it up and it was like elderettes. I'm like, oh, I can't race in these anymore.
What color wave did you have?
I had the Ethiopian color wave.
Okay, because I have in my closet in my house
Or
is
was it the Kenyan wave? Yeah, it was the Kenyan ones.
okay. I
Yeah.
have a bag of Eldorettes as well.
Because that's probably when we were like last the time we were really good on the track.
That was the hot spike. Like, you had Eldorettes. Like, everybody was running fast in
Yeah, dude,
Eldorettes.
people were getting down with elderettes. Yeah, so I had those and I'm like, oh boy, I need new shoes. My Achilles would just like snap like one step in that thing.
Well, I took a couple years off and I came back and I started racing. I had these minimal flats
Mhm.
kind of from the early 2010s, like what somebody ran a world record in. And I started racing and training in those. And I sent them to a friend of mine who's a little younger. And he's like, there's new technology out there. You might want to try it now that you're 40. It's probably better for you. And I was like, I got a new pair of like just some Saucony endorphins. And I was like, ooh, these are really nice.
Are you in the waves, the super shoes? Do you have an Endorphin Pro?
I have the endorphin speed, which I don't think is a super shoe.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so I was at the USATF 10K champs and I was on the line and I'm looking around. And so they had the starting line. It was all the masters. And there's two things I noticed. Number one, I'm looking around and all my peers, nobody had hair. It's like, oh, sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's me.
Sorry, Dr. Leo. And everybody had the alpha flies,
Yeah.
right? Except maybe one or two, maybe me and one other guy. So it's everybody's wearing
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
I mean, they are cheater shoes for sure. And I say that because it's just reality now. Like it's our reality. It's not like I'm cutting it down. It's not like I'm saying anything about people that are running fast in these shoes. But do you remember Spiras?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so this is like what I liken it to because you got to understand my point of reference is when I first got out of college, there was a shoe brand. I think they were Italian shoe brand, and it was
Mhm.
called Spira, Spira. And these shoes literally had springs in them. Like I worked at a running shoe store at the time, and we would tear them apart, and they actually like literally had springs in them. And for a summer, probably 2006, everybody was like ripping in these things. Like everybody was like, I mean, it made all the Africans faster, it made all of us faster, and, like, we were just running like crazy fast in them, and then they got banned after, like, 2 months. I mean, it was, like,
Yeah.
this short stint, and then the road racing banned them. Well, I had a buddy, Devin Volk, that I worked with in the, 2021 trials, and he, was commissioned to do some of the work with Nike for testing their Alpha Flies, and he said that the Spiras in the lab, they can get them up to 4% improvement, and then the Alpha Flies, in some cases, they've shown up to 7%. Spiras to this day are still banned at less percent of an improvement in the lab than the Alpha Flies are, and the Alpha Flies are not banned. So it's like, I mean, come on. It's obviously because one is Nike and one is like this brand called Spira. And it's like, but that it was like way back in those 20 years ago, like people banned that stuff like right off the bat. And then now that Nike did this whole sub 2 attempt, and then that whole product sponsorship side of it, and Nike has a big, foothold in the community, it's like they're not touched. Those shoes just go unhinged. And then all the other brands were like, all right, well, let's do it. So, because they probably knew the road of Spiras. So,
Well, and I've thought about this. Another consequence of the shoes is that if you're training in them, you can recover faster,
yes,
correct?
exactly.
Like I'm thinking about, okay, when you ran your marathon
Right.
PR, that would have made a huge difference when you're doing
Exactly.
quality sessions on the roads, right?
The other thing too is like we have access to like Alter G's now. We have
Yeah.
access to like, all these different modalities, and then we obviously the shoes would help. So say like back in the day, I remember for my PR marathon, in 2011, I averaged 85 miles a week heading into that marathon. Now I got up to over 100 a couple times, um, but I averaged 85. In my first marathon 5 years prior, I averaged, 95 miles a week for that 16-week buildup, but I was injured, I got injured, and then my highest mileage week was actually the highest mileage week ever was 123. For my second marathon, which was 5 years later, I was much smarter. I only got up to, like, 110, I think, once or twice, 105, 110. I mean, now if I had the Ultra G, if I had the super shoes, like, I feel like I really could have got up to, like, 130, 140 very consistently, um, and which is what you have to do to be a high level marathoner, and then who knows, another minute or 2 gets lopped off there, but it's like, it that definitely changes the game for sure, but the recovery aspect is so do you not do you so what do you typically train in then?
This is kind of maybe antiquated sounding, but the Brooks launch.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is, I feel like there's on one hand, when you race in super shoes and you just race in them and you don't train in them, then
Yeah.
that's like pulling out all the stops, right? Um, you're kind of just like just adding that extra little the icing on the cake, if you will. But for me, my Achilles are so bad I can't even really not train in them. Like even if I run in like a levitate or just like a random shoe, Pegasus or something, like my Achilles are so much more sore than if I ran in the alphas or endorphin pros. So yeah, it's definitely a different component there. So yeah. But okay, so have you even tried on a pair of a super shoe and even
I did once. I tried on the Alpha Fly. I have a friend who works in a running shoe store,
yeah,
Scott Gill, and so he had me try on different shoes, and it just felt like a little too much for me. I'm very much on my forefoot. I'm a
yeah,
4-foot striker, and I felt like the Alpha Fly was too much.
yeah,
Maybe it would be okay, but for me, and correct me if I'm wrong here in your professional opinion, I just feel like at this age, what I have now works, and that's
yeah.
fine.
And I think that's so important is to just know what works for you, and if you're going fine with it, then just keep it. And it's definitely, I think that's definitely one of those things where a lot of people get into trouble. And again, we're talking about masters specifically. Um, you have a body that's sort of used to a certain thing, used to a certain training style, used to a certain shoe style, and you definitely want to stick with that as much as possible. Now, are you going to get on the track anytime soon?
I would love to because I always loved the track. I haven't run a track race since I think it's been over 11, 12
Oh my
years.
goodness.
Yeah, I had a bad injury and that was it. And I haven't gone back to the track since. I haven't been
Huh.
on the
What
roads.
did you have?
I hurt my Achilles. I had I never got an MRI, but I had a big bulge in it. So it must have been like a micro tears and I couldn't run fast
I can
for
relate.
6 to 7 months. And so I was really in dire straits because it wasn't getting any better. And then my sister was a runner and she was doing a workout. And so one day I was just like, I'm just going to jump in with her. And I ran some kind of like sub 3 minute, 800 reps, just
Yeah.
like 250, something like that. And the next day it just felt really good.
So you're like, hey, let's go.
And I started doing workouts and it kind of like cleaned up. It just needed time to heal, maybe. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened. Um, I'm very cognizant of that. And that stemmed, I think, from my calf being really tight.
Yeah.
So now I get, you don't want to know how much money I spend on massage. It's what's sustaining me as a master's runner. I have, my old massage therapist I'd been seeing from high school, who was around for so long that he eventually retired at 83. And so I was like, I got to find a new guy. And there's not many of them out there that I'm
Yeah.
like, this is going to be a real good guy. And then I found a guy, Scott Norris, who I work with now, and he's amazing. But he's getting me to line.
Yeah. Bro, you're bringing up such a important point is that you have to have a team
Mhm.
for sure. And somebody that you can sort of check in with and make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Nothing crazy gets out of hand, like no calf or hamstring is just getting too tight. And they're there to sort of calm it down. Um, and anybody that thinks they're going to kind of do it on their own, like they did in their 20s and early 30s, is a little out to lunch. Like you need to need to tap into reality. Like having a team with you is important, and that's kind of what I meant earlier about. It's like when you're at a master's race and you see somebody toe the line, there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, there's a lot of like time, energy, but also money spent to like keep that body healthy.
And they do ultimately really care about it. For you, and this is interesting because as a school counselor, that's what I do for a living. And there's always this idea of who helps the helper because you're always helping other people. But for
Mhm.
you, who helps the helper?
Well, we have, I work with another doctor here, Dr. Matt,
Yeah.
who's been on the show numerous times. Yeah, so Dr. Matt, he's good. He takes care of me. We also just hired Aaliyah. She's an independent contractor here at the clinic. She's a medical doctor, so she's doing more of your regenerative medicine sort of stuff. So there's that. And then I also often, whenever we go to seminars, we'll all of us are in the same boat, so we all kind of treat each other at seminars and things like that. And then a lot of it is like self-care too. Like I have this sort of obsession with like a self-care, and I like to help people out and train people on like how to take care of their own injuries. And so like that is something that I definitely do a lot of. But I'm very much a hypocrite though. I mean, for me, I always like the fastest road to Rome. And so if I can get somebody healthy quick, that's what I want. And so with regards to not giving them a ton of exercises and a ton of like downtime and a ton of like, treatment, I like to just really try to pack a mean punch and just get somebody healthy quick. So for me in my life, like I don't do a lot of core. I don't treat myself a ton. I kind of just like manage as best as I can with just I guess limited treatment. And that's not because I feel like that's the right way. That's just like me personally. I've done that's the other thing too is like I've done my time in running and I it's just about experiences now, and it's not so much about times and pushing the envelope of that. It's more just about the experience of it. And so I feel like I'm not challenging my body in enough of a way to justify anything consistent.
That's an interesting point because my buddy who was a master's runner and he's older now and he went to the race with me. That would have been Scott Gillis.
Yeah.
He said, you don't have to kill yourself in these races. It's like, yeah, you go out and you run hard and you compete hard, but you don't have to go deep into the well. And I respect that. And I think about that sometimes when I'm in the races. It's like, okay, I don't need to kill myself. I need to be in a good rhythm. I need to
Yeah.
be in good form. And that was the race yesterday. It's like, okay, don't go out too hard, but preserve and protect your body at all costs. Because when I started back into masters running, I made a deal with myself. I said, hey, this isn't going to be it's not going to be like how it was. You're going to take care of yourself first and foremost. And
Mhm.
it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to do this for the pure enjoyment, and you're not going to this is not running with reckless abandon and
Yeah.
destroying yourself for whatever dream that you're chasing. This is just because we want to do it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's interesting too because that makes it so that you don't overrun workouts
Mhm.
and you drop your mileage down and you just get to the line healthy. And that's the biggest thing about being a master's. You just got to be available. I mean, like if you look at like these old timers race, like literally like 80, 90. They're
Yeah.
at the Pan Ams. There was a guy over 100 that ran the 100. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, obviously they're not training. Like, one time I worked this masters race, and this old guy, he finished the 100. He was like 95 or whatever. And he comes over to the finish line, puts on his jeans over his shorts and puts on his veteran's hat, and then just starts talking to people. It's like he's obviously not training, but he's just out there and available. And it's like, that is just so awesome. And I always love that Teddy Roosevelt quote about throwing your hat into the ring. And it's like that, the praise goes to those ones that still throw their hat in the ring.
Mm.
And it's so true. So, one thing I want to kind of flesh out a little bit too with you is like, tell me about your time in Kenya.
Great question.
So when did you go and what was that experience whole like?
I went in 2018, and before that, I didn't start traveling. I've been to 44 countries now.
44 country.
I've made a map to 100, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm going to sure try it. Make it. I'm trying.
Dang.
But I didn't start traveling until I was about 32 and had the means when I started my career.
Yeah.
And before that, I'd only been in the US and Canada. So I've done a lot in the last however many years.
Yeah.
And, my first however many trips were to, Europe, Iceland, Scandinavia, stuff like that. And I was ready for a new challenge. I was ready for something a little bit different. And so I decided I'm going to go to Kenya. I'm going to put myself out of my comfort zone. And I think for some people in the Western world, that's a little bit scary. And I've told people, hey, I'm going to South America, or say, I'm going to Africa. And they say, oh, isn't that kind of dangerous? The truth is that I've traveled extensively in both continents, and I've felt, I've probably felt more dangerous situations here in the United States. I felt completely comfortable in both those continents. But at any rate, you go to the travel doctor and they'll tell you about all these things that you can get in, say, the African continent or Kenya, and that's a little daunting. You got to get your malaria pills. But I was really excited and ready for something different and to go see that, get out of the Western world. So I traveled there by myself, met up with a group called the Kenya Experience. So it's a British outfit, but they have kind of they have you camped out in Lorna Kiplagat's training center, the high altitude training center. And so within that group, people all around the world came and joined that group, and they basically showed us the world of Kenyan running in E10, and they took us around, and we did, the typical Kenyan Tuesday, Thursday fartlek run. That was like within the first week. And then of course, I went out at that time, and I went out right in the front, and there's 200 runners, and it's just crazy. A lorry's coming down the road, and somebody screams something in Swahili, and the whole group moves to the right. And I'm like, huh? Oh, wait, I gotta move. Guys are falling, and you're like jumping over them. It's really wild. It's very competitive. And so it's basically doing a workout with 200 people, very hungry runners. And
okay, so let's back up. So, all right, this is at altitude. So what's the altitude?
8,000 plus.
Okay. And then I didn't know this was a thing. So every Tuesday, Thursday, they just kind of go out and hammer.
So you might have like your more exclusive groups like Kipchoge's group and whatnot. But in the town of E10, they'll have like a community run where, there's thousands of runners training there, and they'll come out and they'll jump in and they'll do some kind of fartlek run. And so that was within, I think, the first week or 10 days. So
Is there any structure to it? They're just like, hey, we're going to go 10K or 12K today, or are they just like, we're going to go over there and then come back or something? Like, what's it like?
There's somebody who's kind of the leader because he shouted instructions in Swahili at the beginning. So I had no idea what was going on. But of course, the Kenya Experience people knew, and they had the information ahead of time. They said, this is where they're going to meet because there's different roads and different places. And so we were on this kind of wide dirt road that was, undulating. And so I got about 10. I wanted to make it to halfway, and I got to about 10, and I was completely cashed.
10 miles?
10 reps.
Oh, 10 reps.
I'm sorry, it was 30 by 1 minute with a minute jog.
Oh, okay.
So you go out and then you come back. So I made it 10 reps. And what I noticed as the group continued is that it just kept getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the runners will go out in the front and try and stay there. And if they die, they'll kind of cut their losses, regroup, and come back.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a mindset where they're like, I'm going to go for
Yeah. Yeah, and I had Woodsy on the podcast,
it.
and we were talking a lot about this, and we were talking about a lot about the Kenyan mindset, and I mean, it's very alpha male, it's very
Mhm.
aggressive, it's very intense, and when you come born out of that environment, and you go to the average Western race, like, no dude's gonna be able to mentally compete with you. I mean,
Mhm.
you've seen it in racing, and I mean, you pretty much are doing it every day. And there's been camps in the US that have tried this. I know Hanson's has tried this, like, early
Hanson's,
on,
yep.
where they just like, back in the mid-2000s, where they're just hammer, like, volume hammer, and they had a lot of success, and, and there's something to be said about it, just kinda creating if you can survive that environment and stay healthy, you're gonna be special.
And for them, it's obviously an opportunity for upward mobility financially. You go and run a race in Europe, you go and run a race somewhere, and you make X amount of money. Maybe it's not a lot of money here in the Western world. That can be huge
Yeah.
going back to E10. And I visited one of the runners that was there and kind of saw his kind of humble. He kind of lived in a small sheet metal shack right outside this kind of store. And he had like a little futon, and his shower was just how he bathed was a kind of a plastic container that had been cut off on the top, and it just had
Mhm.
water in it. And then his heat was just a little fire pit that he kept going. And so it was
Man,
very, very humble. And he probably had a little more means to live than others.
than others, yeah.
So you can see that, yeah, there's some very hungry runners there.
And that's the thing, man. Say you're in some average road race here in the US and you're duking it out with one of these Kenyans, and that's their experience. That's what they're coming from,
Mhm.
and you're like, and they're just tough. I mean, like the dedication, the willingness to drive to just get through all that. That's pretty special. So, okay, so they would do two of the days would be fartlek. Okay. And then what was the legendary half marathon up the mountain run?
So the Spar run. And I don't know if everybody does this, but I don't know if it's a half marathon. It's 12 and a half marathon. Everybody said it different, like 20K. But so they took us, woke us up very early, 5 a.m., something like that, and drove us to the start of Spar. And we drove for an hour and a half, and we're
Mhm.
deep in kind of the back parts and kind of the middle of nowhere in Kenya. So much so that the locals are looking at us like, who is that? Who are these people? And we're crossing streams and vans,
Yeah.
and we're on dirt roads. And we're slowly going down into if you know, the Rift Valley. And so we get to the Spar Mining Company. We're at the start. There's really nothing there. There's no bathrooms. You just go and the topography changed a little bit. And so basically it was a run that was 12 miles, and it gains about the statistics differ because it's so off the grid, but I
Mhm.
think it's around 4,000 feet of elevation
Yeah.
gain and about a 7% consistent grade. And there's a lot of switchbacks. And so all they said to us was, hey, if you can run under 2 hours, that's pretty good. And just run until you hit the tarmac road. That's the finish. So, and they said, don't go out fast. You know what I did. And there's another runner in my camp from Japan, and he was a good marathoner, about a 2:30 guy. And at
Yeah.
this point, I'm 37. I'm not doing longer stuff. I'm running 5Ks on the roads. And so he went out, he shot out really quickly. And so I went kind of behind him and stalked him for a while. And then about 10 minutes in, I was like, he's not really going that fast. So I'll catch up with him, run with him.
Mhm.
And then I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And my intention was to only go halfway because we had done a track workout like 2 days before that. And I had ripped this track workout. I'm like, I'm not a marathon runner. But you get there, you get in the moment. And I got about halfway and I'm dying because we're just going up and up. And I'm looking, I'm like, there's nobody behind me. I can take this thing. So I kept going and I just had to fight. And it was without a doubt the hardest run I've ever done in my
Huh.
life.
So, who else was there with you guys with the group? Was it just the Kenyan experience group?
We had some what they called pacers. So there were some Kenyan runners that they had hired and were in the group.
To kinda just make sure you go out and show the way kinda thing?
There are runners from all around the world. Two guys or three guys from Brazil that became really good friends of mine that I visited actually in Porto Alegre.
Mhm.
Um, Rodrigo, David, Leonardo, and then there's a whole contingent from the UK and from Ireland, right, just all over the world, and that's the cool part about it.
Yeah.
And so we had this kind of by that point, it's the end of the camp. We have this camaraderie built because you spend so much time together eating, and there's not great Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah.
And so we that was the culminating part of our trip. And then so we finished that, and that was a really tough run, a great experience. And then right after that, they surprised us and they said, "You're going to go to Kipchoge's camp. You're going to meet Ellie Kipchoge and all the people in his camp." So we went and did that.
So tell us about that.
So we got there and we were only there for about a half hour. And what was really unique about that is that everybody in camp, they have the bathrooms there and it's very simplistic.
So this was 18. So this is before he did the sub 2 attempt and all that. So
Mhm.
he kind of a lot of people didn't really know much about him, right? Because he was successful in what was it, '03 World Champs that he won, where
Yeah.
he which I think is one of the greatest races of all time in the 5K. He beat El Garouge and Bakile in the same race as an 18-year-old. Um, it's a fantastic race to go back and rewatch on YouTube. And then he kind of like was successful, but like was okay pretty much like as a it's not like he was like Gebre Selassie or Bakile where he's just winning that all world championships and Olympics left and right. And then so that was really cool that they took you there because like he was going to be famous like literally the next couple of years. Like I think he wasn't maybe so much of a household name at that time, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. At the other international runners, maybe like the runners from the UK knew him a little better. I'm not as well versed. I don't pay attention as much, but I knew who he was. But yeah, I think he blew up even more after that. And so one of the most interesting things about that is that everybody has their jobs and they have to clean the bathrooms. They don't have any staff or anybody that helps them. So
Mhm.
Elliot's when his turn gets called, he's going to clean the bathrooms.
Yeah.
They have a library. They don't think they have TV, so they have a library of books and they read, and so they just train and focus on training.
So where is this relative to Eton?
It was outside a little bit. I can't remember the name. It was Capsagat. It
Okay.
it was a little different than E10, but it was just outside of it. And great. I would have loved to have run there because
Mhm.
it was beautiful. The roads were really nice, and you kind of see like on his Instagram, you'll see him out there training.
Yeah.
My understanding is that those guys with their families is that they'll train during the week and then maybe go home sometimes on the weekends unless they're really deep in their training. So I got a picture with him, and that was pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. You should send it our way. We'll put
Oh,
it on the
yeah,
media.
yeah.
Um, so, uh, okay, so how many people were training in his group? Like, how many people were like living there, kind of in that encampment?
I want to say probably no more than 15.
Yeah.
That's probably about it.
Hmm.
But you knew the names like Jeffrey Cameron, and
Yeah.
there's another guy I can't remember his name, but big track star. And then the guy that was in our camp was sorry, I'm going to probably say his first name wrong, but it's Adaran Finn, who you have his book
Yeah.
back here,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah. It's like he wrote.
way of the runner. Yep.
Yeah, The Way of the Runner. So this guy was there with them. He was your roommate, right?
Yeah. So
Adirondack Finn. Yeah. This is about book about Japanese running.
they they were going to room me. I was by myself for a little while, and I put in for a single room or a double room, and so I was going to have to share with somebody. And they said, "We got this high schooler coming in. I can't room with a high schooler." So they put me with Finn, as they called him. Everybody called him Finn, and poor Finn, he's probably like had to put up with me for a week. But it was awesome for me because I got to talk to him,
Yeah.
ask him questions, listen to him tell stories. And he's a great, great guy. And I love this book. And a lot of the runners that are featured in this book, I actually got to meet when I was there. And Japheth, who is featured in this book, was the pacer that I ran up Fluorospar with. He stuck
That's
with me the whole
amazing.
way. So it's really cool. And I have the same book. It's a little bit different because I bought it. We were in Eldoret. We had come back from somewhere and we had gone to some like little mall or something. And Finn had gone in. He said, "Hey, my book's being sold in that store in there." She's kind of laughing about it. So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go in there and buy it. I'm going to get you a sale, man." He's like, "Oh, thanks."
That's really cool.
So then, of course, at the end, I had all the main players that are in the book that were in our camp sign my book, including him. And so that's just an incredible experience.
Oh my goodness. That is awesome.
So are we gonna go this summer? Or next summer? Do you want to
I
go?
mean, why not? Like we've been talking about this like global running thing, and
Yeah,
we just need to make it happen.
it's coming with us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely, it helps when, like, obviously, like you said earlier, it's scary going to, a totally foreign place. Like my wife's Brazilian, so we've been to Brazil a couple times, and um, man, going solo to like somewhere like that, man, you were brave to just do that.
Well, it's interesting because I've traveled all around the world. I've never felt more at home, and oftentimes you'll go out and you can feel pretty lonely. You can feel really far at home when you look at your map. And I never felt as at home anywhere else as I did in E10. I just felt like I felt very comfortable there. It felt like home to me. Like I could just stay there and never come back. Sorry, family, I'm not coming back.
Why? Why is that?
I think it's the convergence of I love to run, obviously. So there's so much obviously with running there. It's this very simple life, which I loved. I wasn't on my phone or on my computer. I didn't really have consistent Wi-Fi. So I'm just living in the moment. There's also, it's a beautiful place. It's not your stereotypical safari African plains. It's up in the mountains. It's kind of green. It's lush. It sits on the Great Rift Valley. And two of the most beautiful runs that I've ever been on were in E10. One was in Singori Forest, which looks out onto the Great Rift Valley. And Floro Spar was beautiful. I just couldn't quite enjoy it because it's so much pain.
Because you're suffering.
That and the people that you meet, the locals, the people that I met from around the world. You run and the children, I'd go on solo runs and the children would say, "How are you? Hello." And they'd sometimes be running with you, which is so
Yeah.
unique and
Yeah.
so cool. So you can't help but not feel really good in your heart there. It calls me back. I want to go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
I was watching some of the Jesuit stuff, and they were talking about how they're starting to open up camps in the Uganda,
Mm.
similar camps.
I've been to Uganda. That was for a gorilla tour. I haven't been on the
I know you sent me a video one time where you just stumbled upon a gorilla. Like
there
I'm like working, and then I pull out my phone, and there's a video from Aaron where he's like walking down this trail, and there's like, dude, there's a gorilla.
they're vegetarians. They're pretty safe. That was on a completely different part. That was kind of near the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. I worked my way up through Rwanda to get there. The part where the Ugandans train is not far from E10. It may take a little while to get there because of the roads. But we could do that. We could
Yeah.
go and check it out. I hear it's a pretty good trip.
Yeah, for sure. I know that would be really cool. Be some of the first Westerners over into Uganda for the training.
Yeah.
Because they were like, yeah, the Kenyans do it. They do these experiences. Let's do it in Uganda. I mean, because obviously they're good now.
Well, and then I noticed the other book you have on here was the Out of Thin Air, which is
Mhm.
about Ethiopian running, and that's one place I haven't been to but would love to
Yep.
go to. And that's a wonderful book and a wonderful read that I recommend.
Yeah. We'll put links to all these.
Mhm.
But yeah, so speaking of that, so have you been to Japan?
I've not been to Japan.
We got to hook up with some of your friends in Japan then.
Well,
Because
Finn wrote a book about the way of the runner.
yeah,
Um,
this one.
he wrote that. He wrote a book about the Japanese running culture as well, which
Yeah.
is another great read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wait, I thought that was this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the
not
book about the Japanese one. Yeah. But he wrote also Running with the Kenyans.
Running with the Kenyans.
Yes, that's the one you were thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the Japanese running culture is one of the most fascinating things on the planet for me, because sometimes randomly, like if you go to like Let's Run and look at like random like Japanese results, I mean they're so fast. They'll have like hundreds of guys like under 103 in the half marathon. It's just like some college meet. Like it's just insane the depth there. And I really want to like learn more about it and go visit that culture and see what that's about. But you've been to Brazil with running, so tell me about that.
So my friends that I met, this is the great thing about travel is you meet so many interesting people and you make so many connections. One of the things I love about it, and I met, 3 guys there, and they said, we kept in touch, and they said, "You got to come out to Brazil. You got to come out to Porto Alegre. You got to come and visit." So in 2022, I had the opportunity to do that. I was going to be in Uruguay and in Argentina, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said, we got to go to Porto Alegre. I don't care what we do, but we got to go to Porto Alegre. Non-negotiable. We got to see these
Yeah.
guys. This is going to be a great time. So we didn't really, we communicated back and forth, and I didn't really know much what was going on. And we landed. They picked us up, and they immediately took us. And we had booked an Airbnb in Porto Alegre. They took us like 3 hours away to Gramado, and they had this great mountain town. And we never stayed in the Airbnb, but they're wonderful, wonderful guys. They're great friends. Rodrigo has his own running team, and he coaches. It's called the Ciados Cavalos. And so he has all these runners that he coaches.
What is that, like city horses?
Yeah. And so their logo has like a horse. And so they gave me a
My
jersey.
Duolingo's working there. I'm learning Portuguese. I just realized I'm wearing Brazil shirt too. So there we go.
Just that. So they gave me sometimes I race in their jersey too.
Yeah.
The Cavalos jersey. And they took us to correct me if I say this right, churrasco.
Churrasco.
I can never get it right. Which was probably the single best meal I've ever had.
Dude, a real Brazilian churrasco is like, we invite people all the time and they don't come. I'm like, you're crazy. Like whenever I say the word picanha, like there should be like everybody at our house like gnats, man.
What I loved was it wasn't just, so they were the most hospitable people I've ever been around. They treated me like I was more than family.
Yeah.
And all their friends who I'm meeting for the first time did the same. So it was one of the best experiences of my life. Going to Kenya led to another one of the best experiences of my life, which was going to Brazil and hanging out with those guys and going to that churrasco and just,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing and I think the key component here being just two endearing cultures, people where or cultures where the people are just very giving and loving. And, my wife, who's Brazilian, always jokes that like, you meet somebody on the airplane and next thing you know, you're inviting them to your wedding. And, like, what does Mariah call you? She calls you uncle. She calls you tio. It's like, it's just the Brazilian thing. It's just like, once you're kind of there with somebody, you're just in the family, in the fold, and it's pretty chill. But, yeah, that's a great experience. So what, tell me a little bit more about like some of your other world travels and your experiences with running.
So it's hard not to incorporate running every time I travel somewhere. And I think that's part of the attraction. It's also to my detriment at times because I run too much and then I do too much traveling and then I get sick. But everywhere I go, I love to run because it's a different way to experience when you're traveling. And I think you're really alert when you're running. And I think I really have the capacity to soak things in, and I really live in the moment. And it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, if that makes sense. One of my favorite trips was I did something called a runcation. There's a woman out of California named Liz Gill, and she has a company, and it's some pretty intense trail running. But we went down to Patagonia and we ran up to El Capitan, which was fantastic. I don't really love trail running like that. It's so painful. I'd rather just hike, but that was a really interesting experience. And everywhere I go, I have to run. And sometimes I'll meet people and they're like, "What are you doing? Why have you been running, man? Just take a day off." And I'm like, "No, I got to see the town. I got to do this."
Yeah. So give me some other secrets for what it's like to be to stay successful as a masters athlete.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think we covered probably the main principle, which is I think, hey, you really have to enjoy it. Um, Depressurizing it, not taking it as seriously as maybe you did when you were younger. A lot of people I talk to, they say, I can't run as a master because I'll be slower than I once was. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you're going to be slower. You
Right.
have to find more meaning. It's more than just about time. It's about being out there and enjoying the experience. And you kind of talked about the routine piece. It's so familiar.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then I think holistically, it's doing all the little things. I'm probably a better athlete now than I ever was. I'm just slower, but I'm more disciplined in the right ways as far as I'm not going out and hammering all the time.
Yeah.
I'm really focusing on, and I think probably the biggest thing is recovery.
Yeah.
What would you say are the biggest tenets?
Yeah. I know it's like, I remember talking to Bernard Lagat right before the 2020 trials for the marathon.
Who better than Bernard Lagat when talking about masters running?
Well, right, and so, like, at the time, he had the American record at the time in the mile, and then he was still continuing running, but he was, like, 40 over 40 years old, he was definitely a masters, and he was about to run the marathon trials, and then I asked him a question, I was like, "Yeah, so what's it like now training for the marathon relative to the mile, especially now that you're a masters?" And he says that he trains the same number of hours in a day, but he runs way less volume.
Mm.
So that just meant he does more core work, he does more plyometrics, he does more of the ancillary stuff to stay healthy. And then shockingly, he runs less mileage to run the marathon. But he's like, yeah, just as you get older, like you just have to work hard to stay healthy. And that's the number one priority.
If I understand it correctly, he would also take like a month off completely. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So that was part of that old school kind of mindset where you would genuinely take downtime. You know, when the season was over, you would just cut for like 2 weeks and, you might gain weight, you might do whatever, but it doesn't matter. You're just not doing anything for like 2, 3 weeks, maybe even a month. Yeah. So
What have you noticed about recovery as you've hit your master's years?
I would say, I think that I like what you're saying about very, very limited workouts. I think it's better as the masters to just consistently run.
Mhm,
And then to not really, like, have a where you're, like, peaking for a race,
mhm.
you're just, like, running year round, and then just like you are, like, right now, you're like, "Alright, well, I think I'll go run Subaru," and then you go run this race. And it's like because, the more that you have your highs, the more you're gonna have your lows. So, the more you have your peaks, the more you're gonna have your valleys, and your valleys are when you get into trouble, right? So, if you kinda just flatline your training and just keep your training consistent and keep your volume consistent and not try to flex your workouts in a way that you used to with peaking, you're going to run fast consistently and year round and you're going to stay healthier.
This is so affirming.
Yeah.
I didn't know I've always am I on the right track here? I don't know. Well, and I do know some masters runners that maybe didn't run in college or you know what I mean, were more fresh when they came
Yeah.
into their 40s and they can maybe train a little bit more, but that's not usually the
Yeah, I 100%. There's a couple of the guys that I know in the area that are running really, really fast as, into their 50s. They were either really always injured in college and in their 20s, so they never really got to like fully excel and beat themselves up enough.
Mhm.
And then they also maybe took like 10 years off, like in their 30s, and then they just kind of get back into it. And they're running ridiculous now and they could just pretty much do whatever they want, race wise, like volume wise and everything. It's crazy. But you're right. They didn't have those decades where they're beating themselves down.
Like us, and if you watch us walk downstairs, you probably could see it. You could
Yeah.
recognize it. You're like, "Oh, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he
I'm
walking sideways down the stairs?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so here we are. We're kind of wrapping up on the episode. So any final, tidbits you want to throw out there or secrets or anything for people listening, trying to get some wisdom on masters running?
I think one of the big pieces is for me is having the right. I think you said this before is having the right people around you, and I think just having good friends. So, for example, um, even the piece about you know when you encourage me, you said, "Hey, every master's runner is going to be feeling something." I think it's having the right people, whether it's your massage therapist, whether it's
Yeah.
your friends, people that can encourage you, push you to, you know, um, really focus on what masters running should be. And that's really challenging yourself.
Hmm.
And I think just getting yourself out there and participating. But thankfully, I have the right people around me that have
Yeah.
encouraged me and kept me going.
There's so many different ways. There's so many different carrots in running, and I think that's one of the reasons why we keep getting enticed is that no one person can ever run every race. No one person can ever run every trail. And there's always different, distances, different competition, different races, so the carrot is always moving. And you kind of just have to roll with it and enjoy the process and embrace where you're at in the spectrum of it
Mhm.
and not try to force it. And Woods used to always tell me he would always say, "Don't squeeze, like don't want it too much." And the minute you do that, the minute you're going to overrun a workout, you're going to try to cram something in, you're going to get injured, you're going to have that setback, and you're going to miss the opportunity. And so, it's just about being available, like we kind of keep saying.
Like I spend more time managing my body than I actually do focusing on competition.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of come clean with myself and say, dude, you're not, because oftentimes I won't go to the race or I won't do the workout because I just don't want to do it or I'm not feeling good. And I had to
Mhm.
come clean and say, you're not as motivated as you used to be. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's probably to your benefit. But having conversations like this, being around people that are somewhat close to the sport, that gets me motivated and wants me to get out there. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Awesome.
being my friend and also being a great podcast
Yeah,
host.
yeah, encouraging the process, my friend. Well, let's try to make this African trip happen, man.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And who's with us, right? So, thanks again for joining us. So this is another great episode of Mind Body Marathon, and be sure to like and subscribe, and check in for some future episodes. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you want to hear. All the above. And thanks again, Aaron, for joining.
Thanks, Leo.
Yep. Peace out.